next audience question then, which is what might compel you to consider finding a second source, non-primary CDMO? And, let me put that one out to the group. And again, I think, to your point that you just made, Bethany, about small companies, I don't know how much ability there is to set up a lot of duplication and fail safes, with your CDMO partners. But let me ask that question. What might convince you that you need to have a secondary source in the wings, so to speak, in case something does happen? Anyone's welcome to take that one.
I mean, I think it's hard in the early phases, right? So, but as you move to commercial or have a commercial product, I mean, I think that's something definitely to consider, right? So again, do you want a secondary manufacturing site or a backup? It's very costly to do something like that during development. So for that, again, you just need to really keep on top of what is going on at the CDMO. There are certain things you can't plan for. I mean, there's also environmental concerns too, right? Ice storms, tornadoes, hurricanes. There's things that are happening that in parts of the world or in geographies that maybe they didn't typically happen, right? So, I mean, you can't plan for everything, and so it's just really to keep aware of what's going on in the landscape and what could be coming your way, right?
Yeah, and adding to that, I completely agree. I think it's much more of a critical consideration when you have a commercial product. Think about, a supply chain disruption for a commercial product, and patients don't get the product. That's a huge issue that can bring companies down, especially smaller companies. It's actually counterintuitive. Yeah, smaller companies are maybe financially limited to find multiple dual sources of supply chain. But if a catastrophic event happens, it can actually bring a small company down faster than a larger company. So you have to weigh those options. I think smaller companies with a commercial product, it's a no-brainer. It's almost a requirement that you have multiple sources, especially for some of the key components of the product. We even go down to finding dual sources for key raw materials. The pandemic was a lesson where some of the raw materials ran out. We couldn't get, for example, some of the key buffers, glycerin, because they were being used up by vaccine manufacturers, and all of a sudden the world was running out. So these things happen, and so if you have a key raw material, it doesn't take much to find a second source. It is a bit of an investment, but think of it as an investment for your commercial product. I mean, it may add a little bit more to your COGS temporarily, but is it worth it, to mitigate a catastrophic supply chain disruption?
Great. We've got more questions. Yeah, please, Conrad.
Yeah, I would like to add to that because I agree. In our case, I think we even take this further. In our case, it's actually an imperative to have multiple CDMOs early on, even in a phase 1 setting, to reach the patients in questions, because otherwise we simply can't service specific clinical trial centers if we're not in a reasonable distance around that. That's probably point number 1. Point number 2 is, again, on this diversification and supply chain resilience, also from a sourcing perspective. We deal with isotopes that if you go up the value chain, at some point you're essentially only interacting with state actors. So geopolitics matter greatly in the US, outside of the US, because these are often state actors that supply you the precursor materials. And lastly, for us, and that's why we are going for the CDMO model that we are, is, of course, at the stage we are in, we can't build any of these sites ourselves. It wouldn't be economical. It would be a massive capex requirement. And that's exactly where having that balance with a partner that already has capacity, that has the know-how, but we bring very specific skill sets to the table, is exactly the sweet spot that we want to be in. And then we'll scale from there. But for us, we can't allow ourselves to have a single CDMO, because then what we would set out to do wouldn't be feasible.